Nickelodeon, Wally Kazam. Dragon Hiccups. One day, while Wally and Norval were playing, Norval made a strange sound, and fire came out of his nose. He had the dragon hiccups.
"Don't worry, buddy,"
said Wally.
"We can fix this."
Norval stood on his head. He held his breath, but his hiccups wouldn't go away. Wally thought a drink of water might make the hiccups disappear. He waved his magic stick and shouted, "Water!" But nothing happened. The magic words that day had to rhyme with bash.
"Splash!"
said Wally, and a splash of water landed in Norval's mouth.
"Splash!"
said Wally, and a splash of water landed in Norval's mouth. Norval kept hiccuping, so Wally took him to see Ogre Doug.
"There's a cure,"
said Ogre Doug. He handed Wally a list and a beaker. He handed Wally a list and a beaker. "You just have to find these 5 things. Then put them in this beaker, mix them up, and put a little drop on Norval's nose." First on the list was a thread from First on the list was a thread from an ogre's pants. Doug was an ogre, and he was wearing pants. He plucked off a thread and dropped it into Wally's beaker. Next, they needed a potato from a giant.
"I know where to get that,"
said Wally. He and Norval headed to Gina Giant's house. On the way, Bob Goblin heard them. He decided that he would scare Norval to make his hiccups go away.
"Dandelions are scary,"
said Bob Goblin. He picked a handful and ran after Wally and Norval. Wally and Norval arrived at Gina Giant's house.
"We need a giant potato,"
said Wally.
"Do you have one?"
"Of course I do," said Gina. She gladly gave them a giant potato. "Of course I do," said Gina. She gladly gave The potato was so big, it started to roll down the hill. The potato was so big, it started to roll down the hill. Wally needed a magic word that rhymed with bash to make it stop.
"Crash!"
shouted Wally as he waved his stick. A wall popped up just in time for the potato to crash into it. But the potato...
"Crash!"
shouted Wally as he waved his stick. A wall popped up just in time for the potato to crash into it. But the potato started bouncing right toward Wally and Norval.
Wally Kazam! Wally Kazato!
Cried Wally.
Give me a word to stop this potato!
His magic stick made the word mash appear.
Mash!
Shouted Wally. With that, the giant potato turned into mashed potatoes.
Mash!
Shouted Wally.
Mash! Splat!
The mashed potatoes landed on Wally and Norval. Wally put some in his beaker. Next on the list, a pinch of mud from a swamp. Suddenly, Bob Goblin popped out from behind a rock. He waved a bunch of dandelions in front of Norval to scare the hiccups away.
Dandelions aren't scary,
said Wally.
Come on, Norval.
They left Bob Goblin with the mashed potatoes. Wally and Norval found the swamp. But Stan of the swamp wouldn't let them take any mud.
Mine!
Said Stan. Stan said he would give Wally and Norval some mud if they gave him something to eat.
I only eat worms. I only eat worms and succotash,
said Stan. Succotash rhymes with bash.
Succotash,
said Wally. He waved his magic stick and a plate full of succotash appeared. Stan dug in and let Wally take some mud. Next, Wally and Norval needed slime from a lightning snail. They found the snail, but it was too fast to catch. They found the snail, but it was too fast to catch. Wally waved his magic stick.
Dash!
He shouted. Wally and Norval ran super fast. They caught up to the lightning snail and got a blob of slime for their beaker. They passed Bob Goblin, who was now trying to scare Norval with a pink teddy bear.
Not scary,
said Wally. The last thing on the list was a flower from the top of the ice volcano. Wally and Norval were flying to the top when the volcano began to erupt.
We need something to protect us,
cried Wally. The only thing he could think of that rhymed with bash was trash. He waved his stick and a trash can appeared. The lid made a perfect shield. The only thing he could think of. Bob Goblin followed Wally and Norval to the top of the mountain. Wally and Norval reached the flour, but it was frozen. They needed to find a way to melt it. Just then, Bob Goblin popped out from behind an ice wall with a marshmallow. He thought the marshmallow would scare Norval. It didn't. But Norval hiccuped fire and unfroze the flour. Wally and Norval added the flour to the beaker and went back to Ogre Doug's house. The mixture was finally ready. Wally poured a drop on Norval's nose. It worked! Norval's hiccups disappeared. But just then, hiccup! Wally got them. Now they needed to find a cure for the troll hiccups.